the Monday Morning Quarterback on the 13th of November 2017. A happy Veterans Day out there. We didn't do a program on Veterans Day, I believe. Nonetheless, I think that's the 12th, or is it the 11th? Anyway, our goal is there. A happy Veterans Day from WBRN Radio in Boston on the Bostonred Network. Here we go. We are covering now the NBA season, college football, which is the month, and we have time, the National Hockey League. We have some polling today out of Alabama. We'll talk about that. The Sean Hannity problem there, a very interesting problem nonetheless. This is from the paper in Birmingham, Alabama. Outraged fans of Sean Hannity have taken to Twitter to vent their frustrations at Cougridge. I hope I pronounced that right. I went to YouTube. Anyway, the coffee maker people, they used to be Green Mountain. Now they're Cougridge. Anyway, boycott Cougridge is the hashtag. That was the top trending subject on Sunday. I'm surprised on that one. Some Twitter users posted videos of themselves smashing their Keurig coffee makers. Others used the hashtag to tweet their support for the brand. The ad removal came after the Alabama Senator, Judge Moore, appeared on a Hannity show on Friday to talk about allegations of sexual misconduct and inappropriate behavior that were first published by the Washington Post. One woman, Lee Courtman, told the Post that Moore had his sexual encounter with her when she was 14 and that he was 32. Three other women said he dated or asked them out for dates when they were teenagers, and he was in his early 30s. Well, that is a question of one's perspective, I would say, as to him dating teenagers. That was in 1979, the 70s, the late 70s, I suppose, there, because these women now in their 50s to mid-50s. And the culture was a different culture there. And looking back at that, as far as we're concerned, that is up, as Timothy Scott said, a senator from South Carolina. I believe that's which one's the one he's from. It's a matter for the people of Alabama. Now, the mores in some states, we were talking tonight with a fellow about that. And remember, Jerry Lewis, but that was in the 50s, he married his cousin at 13. So that depends upon community standards, traditions, etc. Early marriage is not unusual. It's not unusual either in some of those areas. And today, for women to have at 14, 13, children of their own. And in the state of Alabama, it was quoted that 16 is a consensual age to have sex there. But again, 16, 15, she was 14. I don't know how old she looked with Judge Moore. But as far as Sean Hannity is concerned, Hannity has a lot of people on his show. His whole show itself is ultra-right. So anything would come out of it. I can see things there that much more destructive to the society than what Judge Moore did back in 79. In 1979, early 80s, in the 70s. Those things are past history. If you want to look at his conduct there and measure it for now, well, if you vote in Alabama, you'll do that. If you're not, so what? So this whole idea of boycotting Hannity, there's a lot of reasons to boycott Hannity other than this particular one. But nonetheless, companies that pull their ad from here, Realers.com, 23, I don't know who in the hell they are, and me and Natural Beauty. I think Natural Beauty is a maker of vitamins, but I'm not sure about that. From Cougrin, Angelo, thank you for your concerns and bringing this to our attention. We work with our media partners, and most of them do incidentally have media partners, and Fox News to stop our ads from airing during the Sean Hannity show. Well, the fact of the matter is they're advertising on Fox News. They should perhaps want to evaluate that particular situation while we are continually strategizing on where we advertise on and off line. We are not currently and will not be running TV ads on Hannity. That's from another place there, from Realtors 21. Very similar. Natural Beauty, we can confirm, but we do not advertise running on this program. That's from Nature's Beauty. I'm sorry, Natural Beauty. Anyway, and several others. Let's see. We had the Realty.com people somewhere here stuck in this thing that they had also pulled off. Anyway, that is the state of advertising on Sean Hannity, an ultra-right wing show. DJ Trump has been there, and other people have been there also. From the paper in Birmingham, an Alabama principal regrets New York Times interview as Roy Moore's comments spark outrage. And we'll look at it. I'm not sure who this person is. This is on the 12th of November, again out of Birmingham. A Jefferson County Elementary School is on the fire for comments she made to the New York Times reporter about allegations that the Senate candidate had multiple inappropriate relationships with teenagers 40 years ago. Well, what he did 40 years ago is irrelevant. The Adamsville Elementary principal, Susan Remick, comments printed as a like of concern were reported Friday. Remick issued a statement on Saturday clarifying her remarks and saying that her remarks were misconstructed. The Jefferson County school officials were standing behind Remick, defending her reputation as an educator and as an advocate for children. The New York Times article focused on comments and reactions from women in Alabama. Here's Remick's comment reported by the Times. This all happened many years ago, correct? I honestly think we are paying too much attention to it. I'm a little disappointed in society right now. It ultimately hurts somebody's reputation. If it were true at the time, it should have been addressed at that time. Well, I agree with her on that. I tell you, people would be... Anyway, many of the comments, media outlets on Facebook focused on Remick's account here from Susan Greenberg. Not everyone was overly concerned. Susan Remick, 48, a principal at the elementary school, said this all happened 40 years ago. Well, no doubt about it. And 40 years ago, incidentally, the mores were different there. I personally litigated so-called pornography cases and their community standards, etc. Not that this was pornography, but that has all changed. This comment from an elementary, this is from Susan Newberger. The elementary made my students made my stomach turn. She should be fired. Well, I disagree violently there. Cale Smith, this caught my attention too. If she was a principal of my child's school, a mandatory reporter at that time, I would have called her to be fired come Monday. Man. Again, there's a First Amendment right here, and she's not advocating white supremacy. Logically, by her reaction, she wouldn't have an issue with a 32-year-old man flirting with one of her grade school, ninth grade girls. Well, I don't know. You can't put words into Ms. Remick's mouth. So these are some of the comments. This is our full statement here. Well, I intended to communicate in response to the reporter's question was not what was conveyed in the New York Times article. First, I wish that we lived in a society where such things did not occur. Second, I wish for the healing to begin with any individual who experiences this kind of abuse as soon as possible. And as our community is changing, sexual abuse has come to the forefront. Many women are now able to share their experiences and confront abusers. For these women, it has been a great strength and courage to come forward. I wish they did not have to carry this pain inside for so many years. It was not only my intention to express, it was not my intention to express a lack of concern. As was stated in the article, I spent my career advocating for children, and I am concerned each and every time any child or person is mistreated. My words were misconstrued. I assure everyone that my actions on behalf of children for the past 20 years show what my true intentions is. I have lived my life in the service of children and will continue to do so. And any other interpretation was intentional, and I regret having said anything that could be misinterpreted in such a manner, according to the Adamsville School Elementary School website. Remick has been an educator for 20 years. Prior to being a principal, Remick was an assistant principal, so forth and so on, an administrative director at some place called Michael's Place, a preschool special ed director, a special education teacher at Mount Brock City Schools. The Jefferson City Superintendent, Dr. Craig Pouncey, issued a statement taunting Remick's professional career as an educator and saying her remarks were misconstrued. He went on to say, we want to openly express that Remick's statements were misconstrued and did not reflect her, and the system continues to be committed to safety and the welfare of all children. The protection of children has always been and will continue to be a priority in Jefferson County. Social media outlets have targeted Mrs. Remick, and the presence of anonymous accounts indicate that internet trolling and harassment, unfortunately, is today's media thing. Well, no doubt. Remick has been a victim of this. Thus, we felt the need to come forward with a statement of support of her. The district remains committed to serving every child in the best possible way. So again, this article is here. We'll put it on the Bostonred Facebook page, and hopefully that is straightened out. But when you go back 40 years, and I've looked at a number of these cases, not necessarily this case, but the case of various other individuals that committed acts of abuse 40 years ago. The trail, as LBJ would say, is too cold in that case. In 1979, a lot of people are now on social media. Were not around at that particular time. Roy Moore at his church here, well, no doubt he's there. As usual, he was 11 a.m. service at the Gallant First Baptist Church. The pastor, Tom Brown, said he had been repeatedly asked about the allegations there. Moore wasn't at service on Sunday. He hasn't been at the church for the past 2 weeks, Brown said. He comes as often as he can when he's not traveling or speaking. And it was worship as usual. Moore was not there anyway. Said he can't speak about what he doesn't know about. He didn't know more back then. But he has been the pastor of Gallant Baptist Church since 1993. I've known Moore for 25 years. About 75 people attend the morning service. It's a rural, evidently, church. And the service opened with prayer over boxes being sent to Operation Christmas Chow, whatever that is. And basically, that is it. That this rural church, and it is indeed a rural church. They preach the story of Zechariah, I guess, the chief tax collector, whoever that was, in Jericho. Anyway, we won't get into tax collections and all that sort of stuff. This is a small rural church, the base of Judge Moore's support in rural Alabama. It's something that you would expect. Incidentally, the gossip columnist Liz Smith died in 94. H was talking about that. I didn't know she was still around, unfortunately. But that is one of the situations that we have. Anyway, let's go to the polling now as we move along here. There's, oops. Emerson College. Let's get their podcast in here, and the professor will explain this. Here we go.
Well, no rest for the weary. Lot of news coming out of Alabama this week with allegations of sexual misconduct on the Republican nominee, Roy Moore. You may have heard. How's that impacting the special election now, just a month away? Larry H. Russell, CLNS Media. We have a new poll, courtesy of Emerson Polling, but before we get to that, we are just days removed from Election Tuesday. Professor Kimball, clean sweep for the Democrats, with the big prizes being in New Jersey and Virginia. Clean sweep for Emerson Polling, pitching a perfect game across the board. Any final takes from this past Tuesday?
Yeah, we took a look at the numbers afterwards, and I think one surprise out of Virginia was the voter turnout. We were expecting a closer to 43, 44% turnout, and it turned out to be really closer to 48%. And if you really dig into those numbers, Larry, what you see is that in Democrat really strong areas like Arlington County, where Northam won 80-19, or in Fairfax County, where Northam won 68-31, the turnout was very high, disproportionately to where it's been. And that tells me that the base of the Democratic Party is very fired up, because the turnout numbers were not like that in other parts of the state where we're more competitive, where it was 50-50 or 60-40 even. But once you saw those Democratic strongholds of 70-80% of the vote, tells me that the base is very excited, and that could be a sign of things to come for the Democrats.
Well, the sign of things to come, we won't have to wait long. As we alluded to, the special election not too far away down there in Alabama. So let's go back to the big talk coming out this past week, the allegations. How is that impacting the race down in Alabama?
Yeah, so we asked that question. We got into the field on Thursday night. These allegations came out Thursday morning or so, and gave them in the field until last night. So we saw that about 28% of voters said, hey, this is going to make a difference for us. But, of course, there's a partisan divide where it's really closer to about 20% of more voters are saying that this is an issue for them. And the question will be, will those people not go out to vote? As comparatively, the Jones voters, it's like 40%, 45% say, hey, we're not, this isn't going to fly with us. Does that mean that they increase their base turnout? Because remember, this is a special election, and turnout is everything in these contests.
Well, last time, the Emerson poll had Moore up about 22 points. You've looked at this race a lot, pretty much all the way back since pretty much the middle of the summer. So with all that what you just said, where do you see this race standing?
Well, we still have Moore leading in this race by about 10 points. There was a tightening of the race, and I think that tightening comes from some of these allegations and a natural tightening of the race that we were expecting to see since the primary. The question will be, will these allegations increase the intensity of one side or the other, or will this just be a kind of a flash-in-the-pan issue, and we'll see in the next couple of weeks if Moore is able to maintain this 10-point lead. And this 10-point lead is important, that he's now at that 50% threshold. When we add in the undecideds, he actually gets to 55%. And those in the political game understand, once you're clear of that 50% threshold, you're usually in a good position for re-elect. So Moore's probably okay at this point, but we'll go back in a couple of weeks just to see if there's any other movement.
Thank you very much, Professor Kimball.
Thank you.
Next broadcast, Emerson Polling will end.
That was Professor Kimball from the Emerson poll, one of the polls out there that you'll hear. Let's go on to JMC Analytics. This is their poll. They have Mr. Jones at 46%, Judge Moore at 42%, McBride at 2%, 9% undecided. So effectively, there are a lot of undecideds there, less in the Emerson College poll. And the methodology here, landline sampling based on general election participants. Is an automated poll, was chosen from the population of registered voters in the state of Alabama. There were 575 and 11 questions. The poll was conducted the 9th through the 11th. The margin of error with a 95% confidence level was a 4.1. So in other words, if you look at that statistical tie, do you plan to vote in the special election. That'll be on the 12th of December. Yes, 73%. No, 16% on this. 12%, excuse me, undecided. 16%. Do you approve or disapprove of the job performance of DJ Trump? 52% approved. 41% disapproved. The previous was basically the same thing. This is in Alabama, incidentally. If the special election for the Senate were held today, would you prefer to vote for the Democrat or Republican candidate? It's kind of a loaded question. 47% would vote Democratic, 45% Republican, 8% were undecided. Previously, it was 45% Democrat, 49%. So it's been close in this poll all along. Mr. Jones at 46%, Mr. Moore at 42%, McBride at 2%, 9% were undecided. The previous round, 11, so less undecided now. McBride is getting more votes. 2%, 1% before, 2% now. Moore had 48% of the last time around. Jones had 40%, so he's up 6 points according to this poll. Only if undecided is selected, the previous question, given what you're undecided, which candidate there. 48% of the undecided would go to Mr. Jones. That's a question always out there. And 44% to Judge Moore, 2% to McBride, and 6% still remain undecided there. And the questions are if you're liberals, 31% were liberals, 26% moderates, 5% conservatives, very unusual there, and 37% were undecided. Given the campaign that has run so far, do you think he's qualified to be a senator? 47% said yes, 43% said no, 10% were undecided. Previously, 50%, about the same. 35% said no. It's risen a little bit there. The allegations have come out about Judge Moore's misconduct there for underage women. Are you more or less likely to support him? More likely, 29%, less likely, 39%, and no difference at all, 33%, I think they go with that. Are you an evangelical Christian? 58%, on the current poll, and 53% on the last poll. And no, 27%, and with 32% on the last poll. To ensure our survey responses are more accurate, are you male or female? Female was 56% in this poll, 44% were male. In the last poll, 56%, the same thing. So in other words, that was where it all was. We go to age groupings here. 3% were 34 and below, 35 to 54, 19%, 55 to 64, 25% of this poll, and 53%, a lot of older people there, was 65 and older. The previous poll, it was 53% also. 28% of the 55 to 64, a few percentage points more. And the 35 to a little less, 15%. And the 3% of 18, there is independent poll conducted for the Alabama special election. There were three major takeaways in the poll. Roy Moore has lost a once comfortable lead he had since the last poll. A slim lead as he had in the last poll. Generic ballot testing, which in itself has been a source of concern for the Republicans. So in other words, there were some problems there before this happened. Donald Trump carried Alabama by an overwhelming 62 to 34 margin last year. Softening of his approval rating is also appeared in Alabama and was noted in the October poll, 51 to 41% there. And since his rating has stabilized, 51 to 41, with slight improvement coming from African Americans, 80 to 5. Disapproval rating in the poll is now 80 to 10. Wonder where those Africans are. Since October, Roy Moore has lost his lead, and there are three reasons for this. He had a 54 to 38 lead amongst men, 42-42 tie with women. This time around, it's a 47 with males, while with women, Jones is ahead by 48 to 42. His support margin dropped 16 points amongst men, 6 points amongst women, with leaners included. So some of the things that's happened, there were undecided. Let me see. More importantly, those who were undecided favored Jones at 37. This is something we do look at. 37 to 23 in October. This time, Jones has a lead of 53 to 33. The political climate has been less favorable for Republicans, even in Alabama. Now, that is more than just looking at Roy Moore and 40 years ago there. The recent allegations of sexual misconduct against Moore has not helped. 29% are more likely to support Moore over the allegations. 38% are less likely. 33% made no difference at all. In summary, Moore has, in the last month, seen the race move against him, while the general election is still a month away. And that anything could happen there. So that is the polling from there. Let me just take a quick look at the Washington Post. It's running a little late. This program should air around 4:30, and we are moving in that direction. Earthquake in Iraq and Iran killed 332 people. The Qualcomm plan is rebuffed by Broadcom. Some Korean soldier shot and wounded, defects to the south. Well, those things happen all the time. President Trump is now in the Philippines. We'll cover his trip to Vietnam. And that up is just some. This is some incidentally from Reuters. We were just taking a quick look at here, and anyway, to the Washington Post, and then we'll do the sports. Nothing new here. We looked at this earlier today. Moore seeks to refocus his campaign on conservative religious values and amidst a firestorm. Now, we'll look at this article here. And Abbott addressing a gathering of the Huntsville Christian Academy in Huntsville, Alabama on Sunday night. The former judge suggested he was investigating his accuser. He's done that before. The Post and called to restore its culture by going back to God. That's something he's been talking about for a long time. We still got the investigation going. Moore says, well, we'll have to see. In an article published entitled "Mother of Roy Moore's Accuser," reporters convinced my daughter to go public. That is from the Burt Bauer, quoted her mother as saying, this is Corman, I suppose how you pronounce that name. Neither Corman, now the other women sought out the Post, according to that. Toomey of Pennsylvania called on Moore to exit the race and said that Luther Strangelove, who lost to him, would be a stronger write-in bid. I doubt that. Luther Strangelove has been rejected once. John Kirsch, he's the governor of Ohio. They ought not to be, said the party ought not to be for Moore. Well, he's on the outside looking in. Some Republicans had hoped the governor there, who was appointed on the mysterious circumstances, Ivey, would have called the allegations deep, who has called deepest and would delay the election. Shouldn't happen, but his staff told local outlets over the weekend that it would take place as scheduled, and it should take place as scheduled. I mean, it's too much hanky-panky going on. The people of Alabama would, a significant amount, would lose confidence. The people of Alabama know Roy Moore better than we do in D.C., no doubt about that. I think we have to be very cautious. Allegations are 40 years old. Roy Moore is somebody who graduated from West Point. He served the country in Vietnam, has been elected various times in the state of Alabama. This is from Mark Short, the White House Director of Legislative Affairs, said Moore needs time to defend himself against the allegations. Appearing on CNN, Steve Munchin said the allegations against Moore require a closer look. Amy Klobuchar floated the idea of expelling Moore from the Senate if he wins. That's hard to do. Our own Adam Clayton Powell was expelled from the Senate on a racist, motivated situation. He from the House of Representatives. He left the House of Representatives and later the Supreme Court. ruled in Adams, in Reverend Powell's favor. After the allegations surfaced, the Secretary Sanders issued a statement saying that Trump believes if these allegations are true, Judge Moore will do the right thing and step aside. She also said a mere allegation should not destroy a person's personal life. So that is where they stand in this. Let us go and do the sports. And after we are out of here, hopefully we'll have some comments from Tim Scott, Bernie Sanders, and a panel on Face the Nation. Nonetheless, these were the scores from last night. The Raptors were in Boston, 95-94 Celts. The Heat was in the Motor City, 112-103 Pistons. And then the Rockets were in Indiana. Rockets won 18-95 over the Pacers. The Mavericks at the Thunder. Thunder 112-99 was the score there. And if we go very quickly to college ball here. Stanford over number 9, Washington 32-22. Auburn, number 10, beat Georgia 40-14. That's convincing. Number 1, Alabama over Mississippi State 31-24. Notre Dame over the University of Miami over Notre Dame 41-8. Florida State and Clemson 31-14. That contest. TCU and number 5, Oklahoma 38-20 there. Iowa and Wisconsin 38-14. USC, the hero O.J. Simpson's old school, 38-24 over the Buffaloes of Colorado. Michigan State and Ohio State. Michigan State just didn't show up to that one. Ohio State 48-3. Rutgers and Penn State 35-6 over Rutgers. And Iowa State, Oklahoma State 49-42. A very high scoring game. Forget what the over-under was. Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech 28-22. Mr. Michael Vick's old school. That's Virginia Tech. Connecticut and UCF 49-24. Washington State and Utah. Washington State 33-25. North Carolina, Boston College. A close game there. Doug Flutie's old school. It's 17-14. Arkansas, LSU 33-10. And Purdue and Northwestern of Chicago, the old Boilermakers. Anyway, 23-13 Northwestern in that contest. This will do it for us. We'll have programming during the week on all of these channels on WBRN Radio in Boston, on the Bostonred Network. You can check us out on iHeartRadio, on Spreaker, and on various other outlets. And I think we're still over at Blog Talk. If you want to catch us there, that's fine. And go to Facebook, Twitter feeds. We're all around any of those, and there are more outlets there. On YouTube, you can go there and get the audio version. We're working on that one to enhance it also. Have a good week, everyone. We'll talk to you soon. Good day or good morning.
With our panel, the question of Roy Moore, Amy, what's the predicament for Republican leaders?
The predicament is that Roy Moore stays in this race. More stories come out. He comes to the Senate. He wins election. He comes to the Senate. And candidates for re-election, incumbents, continue to have to figure out how they walk this fine line between defending him and also saying, I disapprove of his behavior. But at its core, John, what we are seeing right now is that partisanship, especially when it comes to voters, is a really powerful drug. And they're going to stick with their party over almost anything else. I think that if the shoe were on the other foot, you could also see Democrats finding a way, Democratic voters to find a way to rationalize. We just see voters constantly rationalizing, well, this person may not be great, but it is sure better than the alternative, which is the other party.
Right. The pivot from the conversation about Roy Moore to tax cuts. I mean, that's what the...
is a hard one.
That's
we
right.
we want the support of the party to get the thing we want.
Yeah. And you saw Tim Scott do it. You've seen it, just about every Republican do it. It's all about that right now. The goal is to get it done by Christmas. They've done all they can do on Roy Moore, and so now it's just left up to them to sort out the tax reform issue. The House will take it up this week. The Senate will do it by some point in early December. But I tell you, elements of this are starting to feel like the Obamacare fight over the summer, where they're rushing the timeline. They're not clearly explaining this to anyone beyond their base. You had the Senate Majority Leader this week have to concede that actually, yeah, some people's taxes might go up. Sorry, I misspoke there. You had the economic advisor suggesting that CEOs love this. Well, he seems to forget who he works for, because that guy and an entire party ran against sort of big business and helping them out, although they're going to do it in this case. It just, and there are some really tricky details over when certain tax cuts begin, how you pay for it, and again, the timetable, the idea that this will get done. It just, it's not there yet. And I think they know that, and they get very worried that things like the Roy Moore situation distract from it or potentially derail their ability to get that done.
Jeffrey, let me ask you about on Roy Moore. There's a cultural context in which this is happening, which is in Hollywood, in corporate America, and even in the press. There's a new standard developing on how to take accusations. That standard is not the standard of you must have a total verifiable proof. Right. And what was interesting to me about what Mitt Romney said and Senator Mike Lee said is they said we looked at the evidence, as the Washington Post put it together, and this is the verdict we have rendered. And that's what seems to be. There are a lot of people who are sticking with Roy Moore, but this other thing seems to be different and in connection with this other cultural movement.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, you have a situation in which there's a growing intolerance and welcome intolerance for this kind of behavior and sexual misconduct, and I think you're seeing that. And I think there is a recognition on the part of many Republican leaders that the Washington Post report was very thorough, solid, done by good investigative reporters, and so you have that. On the other hand, I was just thinking about something that Amy said, which is that we have to deal with the fact that he could still, the accusations could get worse, and he could still win and wind up in the Senate. And that's not that odd when you consider that the President of the United States, the current president, survived and won despite self-described, the Access Hollywood tape, self-described acts of sexual misconduct, sexual harassment. So on the one hand, we do have an intolerance for this across different fields and industries. On the other hand, you could still succeed in America pretty easily with some really nasty stuff in your background.
Well, especially if you believe that the other side is making this stuff up or doing it only for partisan reasons. I mean, this is why so many people are sticking with the party, because they believe that the other side is lying about what really
They're trying to cast the Washington Post as Oppo research, and the Washington Post was actually neutral.
And they
on
also
this.
bring up Bill Clinton, and they said the Democratic Party tolerated this with indiscretions by Bill Clinton. They stood behind him. Amy, the other thing I thought was interesting in this case is that Roy Moore is saying this is the establishment Republicans. This is feeding into an internal debate within the Republican Party.
That's right. This is the great irony of where we are in politics now, is that the establishment has less power than ever. Normally they would be able to find a way to push a candidate like this out or never let them win a primary in the first place. They can't do that now, and yet voters are more partisan than ever. So you have that really big divide, which is they're going to stick with their party, even though the party leaders are abandoning the person who represents the party.
Ed, let me ask you about this week, the elections in Virginia and New Jersey. What do we take away from these?
So I look at one specific area of the country as encouraging for Democrats. I talked to a congressman named Brendan Boyle this week who represents the Philly suburbs. He's actually a loyal viewer of this show. And he kept pointing...
I love him.
Yeah. He looks at Delaware and Chester counties outside Philadelphia. Democrats there won some local and county elections that they hadn't won in more than a century. He said to me, I wondered how much voters would take out their frustration on Trump on the Republicans in their neighborhood. Clearly, they did it. Because of that, he's convinced now Democrats have a far better shot at taking back at least the House next year, because they said there's just too much of that. They ran on economic messages, on local concerns, but the deep-rooted concern and anger with the president is there, and it was enough for Democrats to win in places they hadn't before.
Is that 15 seconds enough for Democrats? Just we're not Trump?
It is enough, except geographically. The question is, are there enough Delaware counties in these congressional districts to flip 24 seats?
Excellent. We're going to have to leave it there. We'll be right back with Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin. Always Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. He's in Burlington. Senator Sanders, you tweeted something this morning about the president and his meetings overseas. You said, quote, President Trump has never met a leader of an authoritarian nation that he didn't like. And you named Russia, China, Saudi Arabia. Is that really fair? President Obama hosted a state dinner with the Chinese president. He was quite solicitous of the Saudi king, and he tried a reset with Putin in Russia. Isn't this what presidents do?
No, you want to make friendships. You want to have good relationships. But at the same time as we have a president attacking the media every day as fake news, encouraging Republican governors around the country to suppress the vote, playing the race card in the sense of trying to divide us up by the color of our skin, by the country that we came from. While he's doing all of these things, he has wonderful things to say about Mr. Putin. The idea that he reports back to us that Mr. Putin said that Russia did not have anything to do in terms of interfering with our elections, and he believes him. While he does not believe the intelligence agencies of the United States of America, is beyond absurd.
Let me ask you about this question of Roy Moore, who's running for the Senate in Alabama. You know, when I talk to Democrats, they basically want Republicans to be stuck with this mess. Is that really a good idea? That this isn't this issue and these allegations, and what as a public we do with allegations like this a little bit more than something that has to just be handled as, oh, great, it's the other team having a bad time?
I mean, allegations, you're right. Allegations are allegations, and Mr. Moore denies most of the allegations, I gather, not all. But I think and I think Mitt Romney made this point, John McCain made this point, that if you look at the report done by the Washington Post, which is a very thorough report, it was not done by opposition research. I think you can reach the conclusion that what this gentleman did was totally inappropriate and not the kind of behavior that a United States senator should have.
All right, Senator Sanders, we're going to take a break and talk about politics in a minute. I should note that the president did, in fact, say that he did believe the intelligence agencies after his original remarks, so he did clean that up. But we'll be back in a second. We'll talk about the other things on the other side of this commercial. Stay with us. That keeping these statues up is a part of our heritage as Americans. Do you agree with that view? And if not, what should the Republican view be on those?
Well, I think that's going to be decided state by state. But here's one of the most powerful pictures I've ever been a part of. It's having President Obama standing in front of the Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. The Pettus Bridge is a bridge where folks like John Lewis almost lost their lives trying to find a way to secure freedom for all Americans. The Pettus Bridge, called the Pettus Bridge, having an African-American president decided by the people of America, is the most powerful sign, significant sign of progress in this nation. There is an opportunity for us to understand and appreciate the provocative nature of race in this nation by looking at the symbols of hate and the symbols of progress. We can do both. The question will be how states make that decision.
And do you believe those statues are symbols of hate?
Well, I obviously believe that the Pettus Bridge certainly was a place where hate was carried out in a very violent way. The beauty of coming back 50 years later and co-leading a group of Congress members to the bridge and having the president stand below it is that is a great picture of progress in this nation. I can't say that's true for all statues, but I certainly believe that when we have a history, you can't sanitize history is what I'm trying to say. The reality of it is having the Pettus Bridge there, still named the Pettus Bridge, is a sign of how dark the heart can be, and B, a sign of how light or bright we can become as a nation.
All right, Senator Scott, thanks so much for being with us.